Good evening from Yaakov Shalev here. Tonight we are going to discuss the second makkah of the 10 makkos, the makkah Tzfardea, which at first glance is a puzzling one. Let's do a Rabbi Foreman-style experiment. Imagine you were given a seat at God's planning board where he is consulting with his advisors on the design of the plagues, and you are asked to propose one. Will you come up with frogs? Well, true, they're Ricky, frogs here, frogs there, jumping everywhere. But does this sound like a real blow that will motivate Paro? Surely some midrashim enhance the virulence of the plague, but compared to the other plagues, it does seem quite mild. Furthermore, the Gemara in Psachim Nun Gimel Amud Beis asks, what did Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah see that led them to deliver themselves to the fiery furnace for sanctification of the name of God during the rule of Nebuchadnezzar, rather than worship idols under duress? Gemara answers that they drew a kal v'chomer, a type of inference of their own from the plague of frogs in Egypt. You see, frogs are not commanded on Kiddush Hashem. And it is still written in the Torah, and the river shall swarm with frogs, which shall go up and come into your house and into your bedchambers and onto your bed and into the houses of your servants and upon your people and into their ovens and kneading bowls. And the Gemara points out that when are kneading bowls found near the oven, you must say that it is when the oven is hot. If in fulfilling the command to harass the Egyptians, figured Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the frogs entered burning ovens, all the more so, we who are commanded on Kiddush Hashem should deliver ourselves to be killed in the fiery furnace for that purpose. Did you notice the switch in the role of Tzfardea in this Gemara from a plague afflicting the Mitzrim to a lofty Kiddush Hashem role model? This calls for a broadening of our understanding of the 10 plagues. Many Torah scholars have explored the subject. Today we'll carve out a fragment of how the great founder of Ger Hasidus, the author of the Chidushei Harim, is looking at the 10 plagues. At creation, God's involvement and presence in the world was masked, a fact alluded to by the 10 ma'amaros, sayings, that actually present 10 veils of emanation between God himself and the world he has created. Now, 26 generations after creation, God is taking center stage through his Torah and through his covenant with a priestly nation, our nation. The switch from a hidden God to a present one is, according to the Chidushei Harim, mediated by the 10 plagues. They serve as a means of transition from a hidden God to a present one. As such, they serve a dual purpose. Not only are they a tool in the battle against Pharaoh, but they serve literally as a 10-point divine PowerPoint presentation of his power, his reach, and involvement. This presentation is by no means a byproduct or corollary of the encounter with Paro. It is an inherent key element in God's design of the encounter, as God clearly lays out his objective at the beginning of Parshas Bo. ולמען תספר באוזני בנך ובן בתך את אשר התעללתי במצרים ואת אותותיי אשר שמתי בם וידעתם כי אני השם. And that you may recount in the ears of your sons and your sons' sons how I made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them in order that you may know that I am the Lord. It is clear that the 10 plagues are designed to achieve much more than to just motivate Pharaoh to let them go. They're supposed to serve as teaching materials to teach the Israelites of all generations about God, where each makkah corresponds to a parallel dibra in the 10 commandments, so that Tzfardea corresponds to lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai. Before we show how it does so, it is suddenly clear why Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, in struggling with Nebuchadnezzar's demand to acknowledge a foreign god, are taking their cue from Tzfardea, the second plague, which corresponds to the second Dibra of Lo Yeh Lecha. But how does this plague help us grasp the idea of Lo Yeh Lecha? Well, the Israelites will initially be under the overwhelming impact of the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Future generations will, however, live on the land, farm it, and have very different problems and expectations. What does God want them to hear about Egypt? That God was able to kill Egyptians? That's not bad, but not that relevant to the life of a Judean farmer. A God that controls water, rain, animals, the sun, the wind. That's a God that controls the everyday environment of all future Israelites on their land. So perhaps going back to the board meeting and proposing so-called mild plagues is not such a bad idea after all. The scope of God's presence and involvement is taught by the frogs. God controls nature, but not just the macro forces of nature, but the micro creatures as well. The breadth and scope of his control, the depth it penetrates into, the control down to the micro level of frogs' behavior leaves no room for any other God. The commandment, Lo yeh lecha Elohim acherim al panai, stops being a God-willed command and becomes an obvious corollary of his omnipresence. I hope you get to use this at your family seder. From the Shalev family, Dina and I, we wish you a healthy, kosher, and freilichen Pesach. Good night.